Speaking at a MAGA victory rally, Donald Trump says he'll sign a string of executive orders on his first day as president. Israel releases 90 Palestinian women and minors from prison on the second day of the Gaza ceasefire.
The Qaddam station in Damascus was once the pride of Syria. Now, it could be a symbol of the country's revival.
Donald Trump has said he'll sign a string of executive orders on his first day as president to set our country on the proper course. Speaking to supporters at a MAGA victory rally in Washington, D.C., Trump pledged to act with historic speed to fix what he sees as a raft of problems. On the campaign trail, Trump promised mass deportations of illegal immigrants in the United States and said at the rally that would be one focus of his executive orders.
You're going to see something tomorrow. You're going to see executive orders that are going to make you extremely happy. Lots of them. Lots of them. We have to set our country on the proper course. By the time the sun sets tomorrow evening, the invasion of our borders will have come to a halt, and all the illegal border trespassers will in some form or another be on their way back home.
Trump also said he'd sign an executive order delaying a TikTok ban so that we can make a deal to protect our national security. The popular video streaming app went dark late on Saturday after the Supreme Court upheld a ban on national security grounds. But hours later, it returned after Trump's executive order pledge. Trump also took a swipe at outgoing President Joe Biden, criticizing his time in office as a failed administration. He took credit for the Gaza ceasefire deal, which took effect on Sunday morning, bringing a pause to 15 months of devastating fighting in the Gaza Strip. The first group of Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza were released the same day.
Corrupt political establishment.
Immigrants in Chicago are bracing for mass deportation arrests as Donald Trump's administration plans its first major immigration crackdown. Preparations include granting power of attorney, arranging childcare, and installing security cameras amid rising fear.
Tengo 27 años aproximadamente aquí en Chicago. Ellos son nacidos aquí en Estados Unidos, aquí en Chicago. Tengo un poco de miedo porque pienso en mis hijos, que por decir ellos que están en escuela, si un día yo soy aprendida por ICE, ¿cómo les van a avisar a ellos? ¿Quién los va a recoger de la escuela? Y pienso que sería un trauma para mis hijos.
Federal agents initially planned to target over 300 individuals with violent criminal histories, but others without legal status, including spouses or roommates, could also be detained. The operation is expected to last a week, that is if the weather permits, as Chicago faces freezing temperatures. Trump aides confirmed mass deportations are a priority, with sanctuary cities like Chicago in focus. The city recently reaffirmed its refusal to cooperate with federal immigration agents. Critics warn the crackdown could disrupt families and escalate tensions in immigrant communities.
Israel has released 90 Palestinians from prison on the second day of the Gaza ceasefire. A bus carrying dozens of detainees exited the gates of Israel's Offa prison in the early hours of Monday morning. According to a list provided by the Palestinian Authority's Commission for Prisoners' Affairs, all of those released are women or minors. Israel detained them for what it said were offenses related to national security, from throwing stones to more serious accusations like attempted murder. Their release comes more than 7 hours after 3 Israeli hostages were released by Hamas and returned to Israel. The ceasefire between Israel and Hamas took effect after a short delay on Sunday morning. Phase 1 will see Hamas release 33 hostages over 6 weeks in return for hundreds of Palestinians being held in Israeli prisons. Phase 2 of the deal covers steps towards a permanent end to the fighting. It would see Hamas release the remaining hostages and the Israeli military fully withdraw from Gaza. The third and final phase covers Gaza's reconstruction, with Hamas expected to hand over the bodies of hostages in return for a plan for rebuilding the Strip. Celebrations in Gaza after the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas came into effect have turned to dismay as people begin returning to the ruins of their homes. Part of Phase 1 sees IDF forces withdraw from densely populated areas and allow thousands of displaced Palestinians to return home. But as many found out on Sunday, there often wasn't anything to return to. 15 months of the most intensive fighting ever seen between the IDF and Hamas have reduced vast swathes of Gaza to rubble. And that was the sight that greeted people returning to the southern city of Khan Yunis. International experts say that Khan Yunis is the city that suffered the heaviest destruction of all settlements in Gaza. IDF forces withdrew from the city on Sunday after a fierce 4-month battle against Hamas, the longest ground operation of the war. There were similar scenes in the north of the Strip. Jabalia is home to the territory's largest refugee camp, and most of the structures there have been flattened. The camp was the scene of a renewed military operation which started in October last year. The IDF said it reinvaded the area in a bid to dismantle what it called a Hamas command and control center. Meanwhile, residents returning to Rafah found scenes of mass destruction across the city that was once a hub for displaced families. Some say they found human remains among the rubble of buildings. A local hospital director said the city's health system is completely out of service.
في مدينة رفح أقل شيء 3 مستشفيات، لمدينة غزة أقل شيء 5 مستشفيات، كذلك شمال قطاع غزة نحتاج إلى 3 مستشفيات ميدانية حتى تبدأ المنظومة الصحية تستعيد عافيتها. من ثم إذا قمنا بترميم بعض المستشفيات، لكن أغلب مستشفيات قطاع غزة دمرت كليا، تحتاج إلى إعادة بناء من جديد.
The toll of the war has been immense, and new details of its scope will now begin to emerge. Rebuilding, if the ceasefire reaches its third and final phase, is expected to take years. In their interim damage assessment report issued last year, the EU, UN and World Bank put the cost of rebuilding Gaza's critical infrastructure at 17.9 billion euros.
This railway station in Damascus used to be the pride of Syria, connecting Europe to the Arabian Peninsula during the Ottoman Empire. Now, some hope it could be a symbol of the country's revival after the fall of Assad's regime last December. Generations of Mazen Malah's family, including himself, used to work at the crackdown station before it was destroyed in the war.
كان سفر يومي عنا، يعني نشوف قطار ونشوف يعني القاطرة كانت قطعة منا، يوميا نحن فيها 12-13 ساعة. لما ارجع على البيت انا من تعبي ما اشوف اولادي قد ما اشوف القاطرة.
Syria's railway never returned to its former prosperity under Assad, and Malah stayed away as the military maintained control of much of Qaddam. He and others hope the railway can be cleared of its rubble and its dark past and become a central part of Syria's economic revival after the war. Malah hopes it will bring job opportunities and that his son can keep the family tradition alive by working at the station.
Around 3,000 participants from around 130 countries are gathering here in Davos for the World Economic Forum annual meeting 2025. Among those attending, over 300 governmental officials, including 60 heads of states and governments. Those attending plan to explore how to relaunch the economic growth, harness new technologies, and also strengthen social and economic resilience.
We've identified 5 key themes that are critical here. I think first is around reimagining growth and what we need to do, recognizing the kind of slow growth, high debt environment we're currently in. How do we actually break this cycle and take advantage? I think really important here is actually to understand, what drives growth. And this is, we need growth that's basically resilient, that puts people first, it's sustainable, and that this is what we need to, actively think about. It's not just growth for growth's sakes, but actually growth to actually improve people's well-being, their lives, and common prosperity.
According to the latest Global Risks report, the state-based armed conflict is the top imminent risk for 2025, followed by extreme weather events and geoeconomic confrontation.
Yeah, one of the things that we'll be looking at is active commitments that companies and governments make to collaborate around these specific areas. That might be around, the reskilling revolution, around trade facilitation, around developing industrial clusters. And so we'll be measuring our own impact by looking at these concrete areas where people have actively committed to investing more and contributing and working together to advance these common areas.
Thousands of people have attended a rally in Kyiv to demand the Ukrainian government do more to secure the release of prisoners of war held in Russia. They're also demanding authorities step up efforts to locate missing loved ones. There have been semi-regular protests in Ukraine to demand answers about the whereabouts of family members missing in the war. Protesters have expressed their frustration over what they say is the government's poor communication and lack of clarity. Russia and Ukraine have carried out intermittent prisoner of war exchanges since the earliest days of the war, the last of which took place in December. Meanwhile, at least 3 people were killed in a Russian missile and drone strike on Kyiv in the early hours of Saturday morning. The city's military administration said 3 people were injured in the attack. The statement said the Air Force shot down 2 missiles and 24 drones. A water supply pipeline was also damaged and a metro station was closed.